words, and he has a chance to make a very important statement, most likely in his favor.
Chiheb Esseghaier to make this statement in a crowded Toronto courtroom today. All of us, we know that this criminal code is not a holy book. It's just written by a set of creations, and the creations, they're not perfect because only the Creator is perfect. Well, earlier this evening, I spoke to Aasim Rashid. He's the Director of Religion with the BC Muslim Association for his reaction to Esseghaier's comments.
Frankly, the first reaction was that I was quite puzzled because it was unclear why the person is saying this, especially in this context. This person is probably aware that he has an audience, and he has a chance to make a very important statement, most likely in his favor. But instead of making a statement like that, he walks away and says something that is, not only is it irrelevant, but it's counterproductive, and it gives a lot of negative implications about his mindset and where he's trying to go.
So irrelevant, counterproductive, negative, I mean, I think these are the impressions many of us had. But if you had to try to find some meaning in this, or at least to try to understand why he would have said it, can you shed any light on that, or is this something that remains puzzling to you?
A couple of things come to mind when you say that. The first thing is that I would love for some experts to really psychologically assess this person and see where is this person at.
Because this raises questions for you.
Absolutely, because it's an illogical statement, especially to put in that context. You have someone who has been charged with some very serious offenses, and he seems to be not acknowledging that. Is he in a state of denial, or you know, what's going on with him? So I think some further study is required on that. The other thing is that it's a very irresponsible statement, and that was what kind of got me, that you're not speaking to the issue that concerns you directly, and you are making a statement that not only labels you as somebody with a very twisted kind of ideology, but you're not connected to the facts and realities of what's happening in your immediate surroundings. So these were some of the immediate kinds of feelings that I had. And thirdly, the context that he's saying it in. Were this a theological discussion, were this a question-answer period in which people were asked to give their opinions, maybe this was something, a place where he could have raised that kind of question. But it's a very bizarre kind of a statement that has no relevance, really, not even in the theological domain. What to say about the Canadian legal.
It's interesting hearing your perspective, and later in the hour I want to ask you what your reaction would be if you were to deal with somebody making these sorts of statements. So that's still to come. Now back to our top story. As we've been telling you, one of the suspects in that alleged plot to derail a via passenger train was in a Toronto courtroom. Chiheb Esseghaier spoke out saying the criminal code is not a holy book. I spoke with Aasim Rashid today. He's the Director of Religion with the BC Muslim Association. I asked him how he'd advise someone who was facing these kinds of charges, making a comment similar to the ones that Esseghaier made.
Well, if this was a legal case, as it is, and I was asked to come in and either advise the person or advise people around him, my approach would be very direct and quite blunt, that you are living in a framework of laws which may or may not be relevant to whatever religious text you choose to follow. That question does not arise when we're dealing with criminal law. When you're in a country, you are dealt with or prosecuted and charged according to the criminal code of that system. So to challenge the criminal system is not an option for a person who has been arrested or suspected of something. If this was someone who was coming to me to learn about this issue, somebody who had confusions, my approach would be different. I would give them a rational and a very logical answer, explaining that the Quran, he made a reference to the holy book, so he's referring, I'm sure, to the Quran. And so my first question would be that, do you know what the Quran says about these kinds of issues and these kinds of crimes? So I would get him familiar, because that's where he's coming from. So perhaps enlighten him on those Quranic teachings that deal with these kinds of crimes and these kinds of issues. And secondly, I would tell him how the law of a country, or the laws, legal system of a country, are always applicable unless and until they're asking you to do something that is completely and clearly against the Quran or some very fundamental Islamic principle. We are, as Muslims, as a religious duty, we are obliged to go along with those laws. And so my approach would be, I think, more gentle, explanatory, with a person who's coming to me with a genuine question. But a person in the position that this gentleman is in, I would frankly be, I would be upset. Because this person, it seems that they either have been taught a completely wrong and baseless set of beliefs and ideologies revolving around the Quran, or they have been taught that they don't have to answer to any law. And both of those are unacceptable.